Yo, what's up, everybody? This is Mr. Nixon. I wanted to come in with a quick couple of videos just to kind of recap last week. Um, last week was eye opener for me. It's funny because in this class in 210, we will talk about the bones, we'll talk about the muscles, we'll talk about ligaments and tendons, and I literally just got a micro tear in my back just a few days ago, and I went to the doctor yesterday and the whole nine. So it's been a rough few days being down and out. I'm literally lying in a bed right now, propping my head and neck against this wall, just trying to stay stable and letting the meds do their thing. So, any of you have ever had an injury to your back, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not all that fun. And so you'll probably hear me reference back to it when we get to the muscles and when we get to the bones and talking about things like that. That'll be the perfect time to use my situation as a teaching point. But what I wanted to touch base on with all of you, I know you guys are enjoying your weekend and you're coming to a close for your Memorial Day weekend. I wanted to touch on chapters 1 and 2, and this video is going to primarily just deal with a few key things from chapter 1, and then I'm going to come back to you with another video that's going to talk about chapter 2, because after week 1 you should have really tackled both of those chapters. And thank you to all of you who've been sending questions and things like that. Greatly appreciate that. I'm glad to engage with you. If you all have questions, never feel afraid to send questions. Answer them as much as I possibly can. And especially from chapters 1 and 2, it's great to know that you guys are jumping into the material head first. This is great. So let me start with this video. Like I said, I'm going to do chapter 1 in this one, and then I'm going to focus on chapter 2 in the second video. So for this first video, chapter 1, you'll notice that chapter 1's kind of weird. You can't really get a vibe for chapter 1, and that's because chapter 1 really focuses on a lot of terms and a lot of numerous different topics as the chapter goes along. And that's because it's introductory chapter. Now, I will say that there's one concept in there that will ride all the way through 210, and it's going to ride through 211, and it really requires some critical thinking skills. And that is anatomy and physiology, the terms. Anatomy is talking about the structure of a thing, and then physiology is talking about the function of a thing. So anatomy is what it looks like, where it's located, its shape, its size, its contours, its details, its physical details, those things that you can see. And then physiology is talking about function, is how something works. In 210, we focus a lot on anatomy, and we slowly ramp it up to get into the physiology. In 211, we do a lot of physiology. And if you're hearing that, yeah, that's my daughter in the background. She's teaching along with this. So she's teaching a separate course on Gu and Gaga, class 201. So anatomy and physiology, they're important to understand that the two kind of go together. You need to know what a thing looks like, and then you need to know why it does what it does. Now, anatomy and physiology do have a relationship with one another, and the line that we typically use to express that relationship is the fact that structure defines function. Structure defines function. I'll give you an example. I used to have a car. It was a Honda Accord. It was a Honda Accord EX, and it had a turbo kit on it. Had the rear spoiler, stayed low to the ground, and that car could move. I mean, it could move. And if you were in traffic and you wanted to get around some traffic, if you really wanted to roll with that car, you could roll with that car, and you could definitely roll. You could make some serious speed in that car. But then the torque converter and the transmission went out on that car. The whole engine died, and we wound up selling it to get a new Honda. And instead of getting a Honda Accord, we bought into the rhyme or reason of getting that Honda Civic. It was back when the Honda Civic made its rebirth, and they had great gas mileage and all this. I got in that Honda Civic one day, and I was getting on the interstate, and I saw these trucks coming along, and I went to gun it, and it just said, there was no gun, no acceleration, no power, no nothing. And that's when I realized, Julian, this Civic is not going to do for you what you need. Whenever I drove up to a light in that Honda Accord, people would automatically start to rev their car up. They knew that they wanted to race me because of the way the car looked, the spoiler, the setup, the sunroof, all of the stuff, all of the pieces, the sound system in that car. It screamed race me. And it was red, so it screamed race me. The Honda Civic did not scream race me. It screamed, come on, everybody. Let's go to Sunday school. I mean, that's what the Civic screamed. And so you should be able to look at that Civic and you should know that Civic is not for racing. But that Honda Accord, it looked like it was born to be raced. So structure defines function, and you want to keep that in mind the entire time you go through 210 and 211. If you're studying something that has a barrier to it, if the barrier is extremely thin, you wouldn't think that it would be very good for protection, would you? No, it's not good for protection because of how thin it is. But if the barrier is very thick, then that means that the protection must be great, right? So keep that in mind. Structure defines function. You're going to play with that a lot as the semester goes along. Another concept that is covered in the chapter 1 that you're going to want to remember is homeostasis. Let me tell you right now, you're not going to escape homeostasis, okay? Homeostasis as a topic is going to ride all the way through 210, and then 211 is going to take over to 211. I'm teaching 211 right now, and my 211 students have already found that the very first day of class, all we did was talk about homeostasis and hormones. You're going to do the same thing. 210 will gradually bring you into homeostasis. 211 will assume that you understand homeostasis, and it will never leave. Homeostasis is all about your body trying to keep its internal environment happy. That's it. That's all homeostasis is about. Homeostasis is about keeping internal environments happy, and your body will do whatever is necessary to keep the inside safe and happy. Now, in order to be happy, the body has these things called set points. This is where it gets kind of complex and where students kind of they get lost on it, and they struggle with this point, and I can understand because you got to have something to focus on. Set points are things like your blood pressure. You know what normal blood pressure is. Normal blood pressure is considered 120 over 80. 120 systolic over 80 diastolic. Blood sugar levels, sodium blood levels, the amount of water that your body contains, the amount of magnesium in your blood. All of these things are set points. Your body has a set amount of different things within it that the body says, as long as I have this amount, everything's okay. But if I have less than that, I need to have a process that will automatically kick in to give me more. And if I have too much of it, I need to have a process that automatically kicks in to get rid of it. If I drink a lot of water, like more water than my body needs, then in order to maintain homeostasis, my body will throw some water away. The kidneys will actually create more urine in response to the fact that my body has more than enough water. However, on the flip side of that, if my body doesn't have enough water and I'm becoming dehydrated, my kidneys will in turn produce less urine, and they'll retain some of that water. This is to maintain homeostasis because your body says, hey, look, I need to have a certain amount of water in me at all times, no matter what. Same thing with glucose, same thing with sodium, same thing with magnesium, same thing with iron, same thing with calcium. You're going to play with calcium a lot when you get to the bone chapter, because we're going to talk about the fact that you have to have a set amount of calcium in your blood at all times. And if you don't have enough, your body will release a hormone that will talk to other body tissues to pick that calcium level up. And if you've got too much calcium, you release a second hormone that brings that calcium level down. Homeostasis is throughout anatomy and physiology. And you have to remember, homeostasis kicks in because something's off. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be a good thing. But the bottom line is homeostasis kicks in because something is off, and it's not going to stop until it brings it back to a normal range. Now, with that being said, there's two types of homeostatic mechanisms that you want to walk away from chapter 1 with. That's positive feedback and negative feedback. Positive feedback is very rare. There's only two types of positive feedback that we really ever bring up in this class. That's childbirth that's childbirth and blood clotting. because blood clotting is positive feedback. Childbirth is positive feedback. In positive feedback, what happens is the stimulus. In other words, oh yeah, by the way, homeostatic regulation, before I go any further, homeostatic regulation has three parts. Stimulus, actually four. Stimulus, receptor, control center, effector. I know the textbook tells you that there are three parts. You might want to remember it as four just to remember stimulus, because people forget that stimulus is there. The stimulus is any kind of change. That's what a stimulus is. It's any kind of change. So if my blood sugar changes, it goes too high, it goes too low, then that is what's going to get my receptor to turn on and send a signal to my control center, whose job is to analyze and compute the data and figure out which effector needs to kick in. And then it sends a signal to that effector, and then that effector acts on a change to affect the stimulus and bring me back to a normal range. Now, if you didn't catch what I just said, you really need to rewind what I just said, pause it, play it again, write it down. That is very key to understanding homeostatic regulation. It's going to be riding along with you for the rest of this class and a whole lot into 11. So keep that in mind. Remember, there's really four parts to homeostatic regulation. There's a stimulus, there's a receptor, control center, and an effector. The stimulus is just any change whatsoever. So let's use an example. My wife told me I had butter pecan ice cream in the freezer. Guess what I'm going to eat in a little bit? Some butter pecan ice cream. Now, when I eat that butter pecan ice cream, there are going to be two things specifically that you're going to see rise in my bloodstream. You're going to see sugar go up in my bloodstream because it's coming from the ice cream. You're also going to see calcium rise because calcium is in the milk, in the ice cream. So calcium is going to go up in my bloodstream. Sugar is going to go up. Those are going to be stimuli because those are changes. My blood sugar was here. Now it's going to be here once I eat the ice cream. Calcium level is going to be here. It's going to now be here once I eat the ice cream. So those are two things. So what's my body going to do about it? Well, my pancreas is going to release insulin because insulin brings blood sugar down. So when my blood sugar goes up after I eat that ice cream, insulin is going to come from my pancreas and he's going to tell all the cells in my body, hey, you know the drill. Let's get with it. You know what we're supposed to do with sugar. And it's going to tell those cells to manipulate sugar and pull it out of the bloodstream, which is going to make the blood sugar go down. So the control center in all of this is actually going to be, it's going to be something very interesting because it's going to be a very short and quick reflex. The receptors are going to be cells in my pancreas. And they're actually going to double up as the control center. And the effectors, so everything is happening all in one fell swoop. The pancreas is literally going to be the centralized point. He's going to be the focal point for receiving the stimuli and then sending out actions. The effectors in all of this are going to be most of the cells in my body. So let's back up. The stimulus, increased sugar. The receptors are going to be cells in my pancreas. The control center are going to actually be the cells in the pancreas as well. They're going to release a hormone. That hormone is going to stimulate the cells of my body, and then the cells of my body will be the effectors because what they're going to do is they're going to open up doors and let sugar in. Now, most of the homeostatic regulations that we're going to use are going to be a lot simpler, especially in this semester when we use the nervous system, because most of the time, the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord will be your control center. So it won't be as complex as the one that I just used. But the bottom line is that there was something that I wanted to change. And so I had to do something to change it to get it back to normal. If you have questions about that, please just go ahead and shoot me some questions and I'll be happy to answer those for you. But that's negative. What I just talked about with the blood sugar and talking about calcium, that's actually negative feedback. In positive feedback, the one that I was talking about before with birth, giving birth and blood clots, in positive feedback, when the stimulus happens, I respond with a response that continues to exaggerate the stimulus. It keeps it going. Positive feedback is all about when I get the response makes me create the stimulus again. And then I make a response, which creates another stimulus, which creates another response, which creates another stimulus until you get a end result. In a negative feedback loop, the stimulus creates a result that negates the stimulus. So you get the stimulus, it creates a result, the result ends the stimulus, the end. So like giving birth, with contractions, there's a big cycle that's going on. As the uterus is stretching, and as the cervix is stretching, signals are being sent back to the brain and the pituitary gland, which releases a hormone known as oxytocin. Oxytocin tells the uterus and the cervix to relax and stretch, which sends a signal back to the brain and the pituitary gland that sends out more oxytocin. And it just keeps going. And it does that over and over again until the birthing process is complete. Versus negative feedback. In negative feedback, I release insulin until sugar levels get to a certain level, and then it stops. So it doesn't just keep going on and on and on and on and on and on. It just does it until, oh, I got my end result. It stops. It cut it out. In most of the homeostatic regulations that we're going to study this class is going to be negative feedback. Also, one last thing, if you stay out of homeostasis too long, that's what gives you disease. Typically, a disease or a disorder in the body happens because homeostasis has been eradicated and we've been out of homeostasis too long. That is why a common cold can manifest itself into a flu, which can then turn into bronchitis, which can then turn into pneumonia, which can then turn into death. Because that individual has been out of homeostasis for far too long, and that now has led to diseases and a breakdown of body systems. So that's all I got for chapter 1. If you have any questions, please shoot me some emails and we can get into discussions for that. See you on the second video for chapter 2.